Silence gripped the hollow chamber when the elderly human described a burning building. Ambassador Tanaka was 73, attending a centennial summit dedicated purely to peace. Her holographic projection stood motionless. She spoke of pulverized concrete, of choked atmospheric filters, of a soldier in battered combat armor taking 3 kinetic rounds meant for her small body. Power isn't about what you can destroy, she told the gathered representatives. It is about what you can protect. At the edge of the broadcast, Captain Voss didn't flinch. The human commander just stood there. I thought they brought a weapon to end us. I didn't know they brought a shield. 12 standard hours prior, Convergence Station had been a masterpiece of delicate trust. Director Kale Venn monitored the diplomatic queue from the security spire, her 6 chitinous arms flying across sensor panels. Crystal flower vessels from Threxia drifted beside singing glass cathedrals. The queue stretched for thousands of kilometers, an intricate choreography of vulnerable art. Then the anomaly arrived. Her secondary arms, normally steady, began to weave invisible knots in the air beneath her console. Visual feeds resolved a dark, angular mass displacing the vacuum of space. The UHSV Bastion did not sing or bloom. It bristled with kinetic weapon ports, thick armor plating, and localized shield emitters, resembling a jagged reef of sleeping predators. It was 3 times the size of any diplomatic cruiser currently docked. On the boarding ramp camera, a human female in a stark olive uniform stepped forward. A worn steel combat knife hung at her hip like an afterthought. It looked dull and unremarkable against the polished brass of the surrounding diplomatic escort. Proximity alarms chimed a frantic rhythm across Venn's displays. She suppressed the audio alerts, but the psychological damage rippled through the sector immediately. 3 Threxian floral ships retracted their solar petals and drifted backward. Defensive shields activated down the line in a cascade of shimmering blue. Faster-than-light drives pre-spun throughout the queue. The engines hummed a low, terrifying vibration through the station's deck plates. Venn pulled the incoming vessel's specifications, expecting a catastrophic malfunction in the registry network. What she found froze the translucent fluid in her respiratory gills. Heavy deterrence platform. Crew of 800. 300 combat-rated Marines currently aboard. Antimatter reactors currently humming at 96% capacity. They had bypassed standard inspection speeds entirely. They are powering weapons, hissed a voice on the command channel. Ambassador Korath's dual vocal chambers produced a harmonic overtone of pure aggression. The Pavnathi delegate stood in his observation suite, his iridescent feather scales flattened tight against his spine. 3 vestigial dewclaws clicked nervously against the metallic rim of his podium. Negative, Ambassador, Venn replied, keeping her tone flat. Weapon banks are hot but untargeted. Their posture is strictly defensive. A defensive warship is a paradox, Korath snapped. Order them to disarm immediately or we will fire first. Venn ignored the Pavnathi demand. Firing on a vessel of that mass would vaporize the dock completely. Instead, she routed a deep internal scan through the human hull, searching for an imminent strike pattern. The data stream returned a complete physical impossibility. In the lower deck mess hall, 80 armored soldiers were sitting at steel tables. They were completely unshielded, their heavy helmets resting on the benches beside them. Most were eating rehydrated noodles from foil pouches. One of them was furiously scratching at a paper grid with a carbon stick, asking the soldier next to him for a 5-letter word for truce. The humans were solving word puzzles, while the rest of the galactic quadrant prepared for an apocalyptic firefight. Captain Voss sat near the aft bulkhead. Her attention remained absorbed by a thick, leather-bound book. She looked up only once, glanced directly at the overhead security camera, and turned the page. They had followed every diplomatic protocol precisely. Chief Analyst Thuron floated into Venn's command bubble. The Mthodian's elongated cranial structure pulsed with blue light as data processors engaged. Director, I have compiled the newcomer's military doctrine. The results require immediate review before the Council votes on their perimeter expulsion. Do they intend to hold the summit hostage? Ven asked. Her lower hands were weaving complex maritime knots rapidly. It was a childhood soothing habit she had not indulged since her grueling days in the security cadet school. To the contrary, Thuron stated, his emotionless voice cutting through the rising panic. Human promotions flow fastest to officers who de-escalate tactical situations. We asked the new species to send their finest vessel. They complied with our request to the letter. Ven pointed a trembling primary claw at the main monitor. The incoming hull was heavily scarred by old plasma burns and jagged kinetic craters. That is a machine built for slaughter. It is a machine built to ensure slaughter never happens, Thuron corrected. He projected the detailed service record onto the primary glass, highlighting the chronological data. 23 major engagements across their native sector, 0 civilian casualties on their side, minimal enemy losses due to localized targeting of propulsion systems, 5 humanitarian evacuations conducted under heavy hostile fire. They resolve conflicts rapidly, often without firing a single lethal shot. They simply arrive, and the opposition surrenders. The mention of past engagements made Korath's channel flare red. They humiliated my people at the Kessler outpost. They broke our drives and offered medical aid to the survivors. It is an insult. It is efficiency, Thuron replied. Ven watched the human commander on the muted feed. Voss was not watching the tactical feeds at all. The sulfur tang of the heavy engine wash was slowly bleeding into the station's sterile air filters. The Council operated on strict aesthetic communication. You showed open hands. You grew ships from glass and light to prove peaceful intent. Humanity had examined that logic, deemed it highly vulnerable, and wrapped themselves in dark titanium alloy instead. Then, the incoming main communication array locked onto the Council frequency. The transmission did not originate from the heavily armored captain currently on board. A different human face appeared on the primary monitors across Convergence Station. Ambassador Yuki Tanaka sat in a modest room, thousands of light-years away on Earth. She did not wear a stiff uniform. She wore a simple knitted gray sweater. Council Chair Luminar, Tanaka began, her voice soft but heavily amplified across the network. We understand our arrival has caused severe distress. We are receiving withdrawal notices from 16 separate delegations. Korath slammed his beak into his microphone. You brought a world breaker to a peace summit. Withdraw your monster or be expelled from orbit. In her quarters, Captain Voss finally closed her history book. A sharp, definitive snap echoed over her local mic. She picked up a frayed scrap of paper, marked her page carefully, and set the heavy tome on the table. Tanaka leaned closer to her camera. Every battle we fight is a failure of deterrence. We prefer to win without firing. Predator logic, Korath screeched. A violent justification. Ven's panels indicated multiple species voting to activate the station's orbital defense ring. The Quillian delegates, bioluminescent cephalopods floating in their pressurized water tanks, were flashing rapid patterns of pure terror. Their consensus-based paranoia was highly contagious. The Threxian representatives had already sealed their environmental suits, expecting the hull to breach. If the defense ring fired even a warning shot, the heavily armed newcomer would undoubtedly retaliate. The automated targeting computers on that gray monolith would shred the station's defenses in seconds. Millions would die in the crossfire. Ven's fingers hovered over the manual override lock. She possessed the authority to expel the ship. One button press would force them into an emergency hyperspace jump. They show us their sword, the Quillian ambassador broadcasted, chromatophores pulsing a sickly, terrified yellow. We cannot trust a creature with fangs. It is against nature. Ambassador, Tanaka said softly, look closely at the sword. We are not hiding it. Ven maximized the visual on Captain Voss. The officer was walking toward the airlock now. The worn knife bounced slightly against her thigh. It was not drawn. It was not positioned for a quick tactical draw. The paracord wrapping was frayed from years of tight gripping, but the heavy snap closure over the metal hilt was securely fastened in place. "We make weapons to prevent war," Tanaka continued. Her voice carried the immense weight of historical mistakes. "We show strength to avoid having to use it. You build ships of glass because you have never had a neighbor who likes the sound of breaking glass. We have. So we built armor." Thuron manipulated the data streams, pushing ancient human literature into the translation matrices. "Director Ven, consider their art. 3,000 years of stories. They do not revere the predator. They revere the armored figure standing between the village and the fire, the warrior who stands watch so others can sleep. To them, protection and power are the exact same concept." Silence gripped the hollow chamber as Tanaka recounted her childhood. The burning building, the kinetic rounds, the soldier stepping in front of her. "Power isn't about what you can destroy," she told the gathered species. "It is about what you can protect." At the edge of the broadcast, Captain Voss stood perfectly still. She let the galaxy absorb the contradiction of her presence. Ven's lower hands finally stopped their frantic knot weaving. She pressed all 6 limbs flat against the cool console. She understood the paradox. Humanity had brought the only thing they believed could guarantee the summit's survival. They had brought a thick shield. "If we demand they leave," Chair Luminar asked, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. Ven routed the audio directly to the human comms. Voss answered immediately. "We will power down our drives, file a formal complaint and leave." "Peacefully." "No," the Quillian ambassador interrupted, chromatophores shifting to a steady, resolute blue. "They showed us their blade. That is entirely honest. I vote to accept the honesty." The voting tallies rolled across Ven's screen. Green markers cascaded down the digital list. Even the Pavnathi delegation abstained rather than issue a formal veto. The human race had been accepted into the fold, not as vulnerable diplomats in glass towers, but exactly as they actually were. A sudden proximity alert flared red on Ven's console. Unregistered pirate signatures were dropping out of hyperspace, targeting a nearby refugee convoy. Ven did not sound the station-wide alarm. She simply opened a secure channel to the heavy deterrence platform. The massive vessel carefully maneuvered among the fragile crystalline ships, its engines powering down into a low rumble. The worn knife hung securely on the captain's belt as she stepped onto the station's primary boarding ramp. The same knife, still sheathed, had cut ration packs and rescue ropes for years. It had never once tasted blood in anger. That was the whole point of carrying it. The gray hull of the human vessel cast a long shadow over the delicate floral ships. Its heavy targeting arrays remained dark, locked into a neutral forward position. The loading ramp settled onto the deck.